The November cold arrived in Harrington, Georgia, 3 weeks ahead of schedule that year. It was the kind of cold that doesn't announce itself gradually, doesn't ease you in with crisp mornings and golden afternoons. It showed up overnight, complete and uncompromising, the way bad news always does, all at once. No warning, no mercy. By the morning of the 14th, frost had crept across every car windshield on Calvert Street and stayed there well past noon. The sky was the particular shade of white that doesn't promise snow, just threatens it. Steam curled up from sidewalk grates and vanished immediately, as if even warmth couldn't survive the air long enough to matter. Maya Monroe knew this cold. She knew it the way you know a neighbor you never asked to have, intimately without warmth, simply because there's no avoiding them. Or she felt it through the walls of apartment 4C on Calvert Street, where the radiator knocked and hissed but delivered something closer to disappointment than actual heat. She felt it through the worn soles of her work shoes when she stood for 8 hours on the cafeteria floor at Harrington General Hospital. She felt it in the hollow space in her chest that had opened up 2 years ago and hadn't fully closed since. She was 32 years old and she was tired in ways that sleep didn't fix. By 6:15 that morning, Maya had already packed Lily's lunch: a peanut butter sandwich, an apple, a small bag of crackers that she'd counted out, not because she was obsessive about portions, but because there were only so many crackers left in the box, and she needed to make them last until Thursday. Payday was Thursday. A Thursday felt very far away. She stood at the bathroom mirror for exactly 4 minutes, which was how long she allowed herself. Foundation to cover the shadows under her eyes. A little mascara, her hair pulled back tight because there wasn't time for anything else and hadn't been for a long time. She looked at herself and tried to find the woman she'd been before. The one who used to hum while she cooked, who used to sleep all the way through the night, who used to believe things were generally going to work out. She found traces of her, just traces. "Mama!" Lily's voice floated through the thin apartment wall, bright and certain as a small bell. "Mama, my left shoe doesn't want to go on." Maya dried her hands and went to help. Lily Monroe was 7 years old and had been, since approximately the moment she learned to walk, the most determined small person Maya had ever encountered. She was slight for her age, with her mother's dark eyes and her father's stubborn chin, and a quality that didn't come from either of them. A kind of watchful gentleness, an attention to the world around her that made people pause when they looked at her. Teachers commented on it. Strangers noticed it. Old women at the bus stop said things like, "She's got an old soul, that one." And Maya would nod and feel something complicated, because yes, her daughter did seem older than 7 in certain moments. And Maya wasn't entirely sure whether that was a gift or whether it was the quiet cost of a childhood that had gotten harder than it should have been. She got the shoe on. Lily beamed at her like she'd solved something magnificent. "Thank you, Mama." "Mm-hmm." Coat. Lily retrieved her coat from the hook by the door. A purple one, a size too big because Maya had bought it with growing room, and the growing hadn't quite caught up yet, and wrestled her arms into it with practiced difficulty. Maya watched her and felt the familiar pull of something between love and sorrow that didn't have a word for it exactly. Just the particular ache of looking at your child and knowing you would burn the world down for them, and also knowing that right now in this season of your life, you couldn't afford to fix the draft under the front door. They left at 7:10. Maya locked the deadbolt twice out of habit, and they went down the stairs together, Lily's hand in hers, their breath making small clouds in the stairwell that was barely warmer than outside. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. The walk to Lily's school took 11 minutes when the lights were cooperative. Maya had timed it. She'd timed most of the routes in her life now. Not because she was a particularly organized person by nature, but because when you're working 2 jobs and raising a child alone, Time stops being something that passes and becomes something you manage, something you stretch and portion out like the last of the crackers in the box. Harrington Elementary was a low brick building with a painted mural on the side fence. Children in a circle, all different colors, their hands reaching up toward a big painted sun. Maya had always liked that mural. Some mornings it was the first cheerful thing she saw. She kissed Lily at the gate. Lily wrapped both arms around her mother's neck and held on for a moment longer than usual, which she sometimes did, as if she could sense, with that careful attention of hers, when her mother needed the extra second. "I'll be right here at 3, Maya said. Lily pulled back and looked at her, those dark eyes very serious. "Mama, yeah, bug. Today's a good day." She said it simply, the way children sometimes state things as facts that the rest of us have forgotten or choices. Then she turned and ran toward the school entrance, her purple coat too big, her backpack bouncing, and Maya stood at the fence and watched her go. Today's a good day. Maya took a breath of cold air, let it out slowly. She walked to the bus stop. The situation with the rent had been building since September. That was when the letter came. Not the first letter, but the letter with the specific language that meant they were no longer in the territory of warnings. Mrs. Patricia Elkins, the building manager, was a businesslike woman in her late 50s who had been generous longer than she was required to be, and who had finally reluctantly reached the limit of that generosity. The letter said that the balance of $640 needed to be paid in full by December 1st, or proceedings would begin. It was written with the careful neutrality of someone who didn't enjoy writing it, which somehow made it worse than if it had been cold. Indifferent cruelty is easier to be angry at than reluctant necessity. $640. Maya had done the math so many times she could do it in her sleep, and sometimes did. Her job at the hospital cafeteria paid $14 an hour. She worked 5 days a week, which gave her, after taxes, just enough to cover food and utilities and Lily's school lunch account and the minimum payment on the credit card she'd opened when the car needed a new alternator back in the spring. On the 3 nights a week that Lily spent with Mrs. Ortega across the hall, a retired teacher who had become, quietly and without either of them quite naming it, something between a neighbor and a lifeline. Maya went and cleaned offices downtown for a company called Pristine Point, which paid her $11 an hour in cash and no benefits. She vacuumed and emptied trash cans and cleaned bathrooms and tried not to look at the photographs on the executive desks, the smiling families in their warm, complete lives. And on the nights she failed at that, she cleaned faster. Between the 2 jobs, she was making it, just making it, in the way that means you are technically surviving, but cannot afford a single thing to go wrong. And things in Maya Monroe's experience had a way of going wrong. The alternator had been one thing. Lily's ear infection, 3 visits to urgent care because Maya didn't have a pediatrician, because the wait for new patients at the clinic covered by her insurance was 11 weeks, and a child's ear infection does not wait 11 weeks, had been another. Small catastrophes, each one manageable in isolation, devastating in accumulation. She thought about her mother sometimes when she was riding the bus home at 11:30 at night, the city dark and quiet around her. Her mother had raised 2 children alone after Maya's father left, worked a checkout line at a grocery store for 22 years, never owned a car, never once took a vacation, and had still somehow always had dinner on the table and a hug to spare. Maya had grown up thinking that was just what mothers did, that it was a thing that came naturally, the way love came naturally. She understood now at 32 what it had actually cost. She wished she had said so out loud when she still could. Her mother had passed 4 years ago, just before Lily's 3rd birthday, another thing that had gone wrong at the wrong time. She didn't let herself go down that road for long. The bus stopped. She got off. She went to work. It was a Saturday, in the Saturday after the rent letter as it happened, when Maya took Lily grocery shopping. She'd written the list Thursday night, sitting at the kitchen table after Lily was asleep, working through the numbers with the focused practicality of someone who has learned that emotions are not useful tools for budgeting. She had $47, not $47 until Thursday, $47, period. The full sum of what was available to her after she'd set aside the bus fare for the week. The credit card was at its limit. The small savings account she'd been building, $12 a week when she could manage it, had been emptied to pay the electric bill in October. $47 for a week of groceries for two people, one of whom was a growing 7-year-old who had recently developed very strong opinions about what constituted acceptable food. She made the list work. She always made the list work. Meh, it was just a thing she'd learned to do. Lily held her hand in the parking lot of Parker's Family Market, skipping lightly every third step in the way that had been her default mode of movement since roughly age 4. She was talking about something, a story one of her classmates had told her about a dog that had learned to open its own crate, and Maya was listening, or trying to, while simultaneously reviewing the grocery list in her head and calculating whether she had enough for both the pasta and the chicken thigh, or just one and which one. She almost missed him entirely. He was sitting at the far end of the store's front entrance, in the narrow space between the automatic doors and the corner of the building, tucked into the small shelter that the overhang created. He was an old man, or appeared to be, with white hair that was more tangled than long, a coat that might once have been navy but had gone the grayish color of things that have been through too much weather, and a paper cup in front of him on the concrete. His head was slightly bowed, shoulders curved against the cold in the particular posture of someone who has stopped expecting comfort. Maya registered him the way you register a stop sign, technically, peripherally, without fully looking. She had lived in Harrington long enough to have developed the particular urban skill of noticing without engaging, a survival technique that most people in cities learn without knowing they've learned it. She wasn't proud of it. It was just the way things were. She pulled open the door, grocery list in hand. "Mama." Lily had stopped walking. Maya turned. Her daughter was standing 3 feet behind her, not moving, looking at the old man with the focused attention she gave things that mattered to her. "Come on, Bug, it's cold." "He doesn't have gloves," Lily said. Maya looked at the man again. She looked more carefully this time. Lily was right. His hands, folded loosely around the paper cup, were bare. The knuckles were reddened from the cold. His fingernails were clean, she noticed. An unexpected detail, a small, incongruous dignity in the middle of everything else. "Come on, Lily." She said it gently but firmly, the tone she developed for moments like this. Not unkind, just practical, just navigating the world as it actually was. Lily came, but she looked back over her shoulder as they went through the door, and Maya felt that look the way you feel a draft. Quick, cold, and then gone. Inside the store, it was warm and smelled like bread from the bakery section. Lily cheered up immediately, the way children do, responsive to the world around them in a way that adults slowly lose and mostly mourn only in retrospect. She walked beside Maya with the handbasket, carrying it with great seriousness, making small comments about the things they passed. "Ooh, those cookies have sprinkles. Not on the list." What if they were on the list conceptually? They're not. Lily sighed with the theatrical sorrow of a person who has been deeply wronged, and then moved on cheerfully to commenting on the shape of a particular butternut squash. Maya moved efficiently through the aisles. Pasta, canned tomatoes, chicken thighs. She found a family pack that worked out better per pound, a small victory. Rice, dried beans, an onion, 2 bell peppers, a bunch of bananas that were starting to spot, marked down to 30 cents, perfect for Lily's after-school snacks. Eggs, bread. She was $6 under her limit when she hit the dairy section, which meant she could get the block of cheese instead of the shredded bag, which would last longer, which meant next week might be a little easier. Small victories, you collected them. You counted on them. She was at the register, watching the total climb toward 47, when she noticed Lily's hand reach into the pocket of the purple coat. She didn't think anything of it. Lily carried all kinds of things in that pocket. Hair ties, small rocks she'd found interesting, once an entire collection of folded paper cranes she'd been making at school. Maya was watching the register screen, 43.82. She let out a breath, paid, gathered the bags. Come on! Outside, the cold hit them again, sharp and immediate. The old man was still there. Maya was arranging the bags in her arms, keys in hand, already thinking about the bus schedule and whether they'd make the 12:15 or have to wait for the 12:45. She heard it before she saw it, the faint metallic sound of a quarter dropping into a paper cup. She looked up. Lily was crouched down in front of the man, her small hand extended, the quarter already gone. And the man, the old man with the bare red hands and the worn coat, was looking at her with an expression that Maya could not, in that moment, fully read. Lily. Maya's voice came out sharper than she intended. Lily looked back at her without guilt, without flinching. Just that direct, serious gaze. He didn't have anything in his cup, Mama. We talked about... I know. Lily turned back to the man. She was still crouched at his eye level, the way children crouch naturally and adults have to remind themselves to do. I've been saving it, she told him seriously. It was for the gumball machine, but I decided you needed it more. The old man looked at her. It was a long look, the kind that sees things. He had eyes that were... And Maya noticed this against her will, because she was still trying to arrange her expression into something firm and practical. Very clear. Not clouded or distant the way you sometimes expect. The way cold and hardship sometimes turns a person's gaze inward until there's nothing outward-facing left. These eyes were present, intensely, quietly present. However, they looked at Lily the way a person looks at something they didn't expect to find. You saved it, he said. His voice was low and unhurried, deeper than she expected. The kind of voice that sounded like it had come from somewhere specific. 3 weeks, Lily confirmed. Sometimes I forgot it was in my pocket, but then I remembered. The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. Something more than that, somehow. Something that looked like the memory of feeling something he'd stopped counting on feeling. Well, he said, that's a fine thing then. Thank you. Lily nodded, satisfied in the particular way of a child who has done something that made complete internal sense and doesn't require the validation of the adult world to remain valid. She stood up, reclaimed her mother's hand. His name is Arthur, she told Maya, Arase with total confidence as if she had simply known this all along. Maya looked at the man. He hadn't offered his name. As far as she could tell, he hadn't spoken it. He was looking at Lily still, and the expression on his face had settled into something she couldn't quite name. It wasn't gratitude exactly, though there was gratitude in it. It wasn't surprise, though there was something of that too. It was more like recognition, the look of a person who has been searching for a specific thing for a long time and has just found it somewhere completely unexpected. How did you know that? Maya asked her daughter. Lily shrugged with the serenity of the inexplicable. I just did. Maya looked at the man for one more moment. He had shifted his gaze to her now. Not demanding, not appealing, just looking. She felt, suddenly and uncomfortably, in that he was the one seeing her rather than the other way around. Come on, she said to herself as much as to Lily. They walked to the bus stop. Maya thought about it on the bus. She tried not to. She had things to think about that were more immediately relevant: the rent, the grocery bags on her lap, whether Lily's winter boots were going to last the season, or whether she needed to start looking at consignment shops now, while the selection was still decent. Real, practical, pressing things. But she kept coming back to the man's face, the quality of his attention, the clarity in those eyes that didn't match the coat, the cup, the corner of a grocery store entrance where the wind came around the building in a way that must have cut right through whatever warmth a worn navy coat could provide. She thought about the quarter. 3 weeks. Lily had said. Lily, who at the beginning of every month put both hands out for her allowance, 50 cents, which was all Maya could manage, and immediately began planning what she'd do with it. The gumball machine at Parker's had been the current obsession for at least a month. Maya had heard about the gumball machine approximately 40 times in various contexts, and she had given it up. Not impulsively, not in the spontaneous way that children sometimes give things away and immediately regret it. She had crouched down and looked at a stranger and made a decision based on a genuine assessment that he needed it more. He didn't have anything in his cup, Mama. Maya shifted the grocery bags in her lap. Outside the bus window, Harrington moved past. The brick storefronts, the laundromat with the hand-lettered sign in the window, and the nail salon, the barber shop, the church with the message board out front that changed every week. It said this week, "What you give away, you keep forever." She looked at that for a moment as the bus passed it. Then she looked at Lily, who had fallen asleep against her shoulder, her purple coat buttoned up to her chin, utterly at peace, the way children are when they have done the thing that felt right and their conscience is quiet. Maya put her arm around her daughter. She didn't know why the man's face kept coming back to her. She didn't know why the clarity of his gaze felt like something she'd carry. She didn't know why Lily had known his name. She wouldn't know until the next morning that any of these things mattered. The apartment was cold when they got home. Had the radiator knocked twice in greeting and then subsided back into its usual inadequacy. Maya turned the oven on briefly, not to cook anything, just to take the edge off, a trick she'd learned in her first winter in this place. She unpacked the groceries with the focused economy of someone arranging pieces on a board. Everything in its specific place, organized by the logic of what would be used first and what needed to last. Lily helped, which meant she handed things up from the bags with a running commentary on each item that was approximately twice as long as the task required and 4 times as charming. "This is the pasta. It's a very long pasta. I think it's the longest pasta we've ever gotten." Don't you think it's very long? It's linguine." "That's a great name." Lily considered it. "Linguine. Now that sounds like a character in a story. Put it in the cabinet." "What kind of story would linguine be in?" Maya smiled despite herself. "A delicious one. Cabinet." After the groceries were put away, Lily settled at the kitchen table with her drawing pad, a thing that had become her primary Saturday afternoon occupation, filling page after page with the kind of enthusiastic, energetic drawings that children make before anyone tells them there are rules about what things are supposed to look like. Mostly people, mostly animals. Occasionally people who were also, somehow, animals, which Maya privately felt was a perfectly reasonable artistic direction. Maya made tea and sat across from her and worked on the budget spreadsheet she kept in a notebook, in the one where she tracked every dollar in and every dollar out with the meticulous attention of someone for whom every dollar had weight. The math hadn't changed. It hadn't gotten any better since Thursday, or since the letter, or since October when the electric bill hit. $640 by December 1st. She looked at the numbers, turned them around, set them in different orders. They were stubbornly, immovably the same. She could call her brother Marcus in Atlanta. She had considered this, turned it over, set it aside. Marcus had his own life, his own family, a mortgage payment, and 2 kids in elementary school, and a wife who worked part-time because their youngest needed more attention than a full-time schedule allowed. Asking Marcus felt like the beginning of a debt she wasn't sure she knew how to carry. On not the money kind, the other kind. She could ask at the hospital about extra shifts. She'd done that in September and been told the holiday schedule wasn't available yet. Check back in November. It was November now. She'd check on Monday. She could call the nonprofit that helped with utilities sometimes. She'd heard about it from one of the women she worked with at Pristine Point, a woman named Gloria who had navigated more of these systems than Maya had and knew which ones were real and which ones put you on a waiting list that was 3 months long and therefore not actually useful. The nonprofit might help with utilities, freeing up some of what she'd allocated there toward the rent. It was worth a call, small strategies, small pivots, pressing against the edges of a situation that didn't have an obvious solution. So just a series of partial ones that together might add up to something. Today's a good day, Lily had said that morning. Maya looked at her daughter, head bent over the drawing pad, tongue just barely visible at the corner of her mouth, the way it got when she was concentrating. Drawing something with specific intention, a series of careful lines. "What are you making?" Lily looked up. "The man from outside the store." Maya was quiet for a moment. "What made you decide to draw him?" Lily looked back down at the paper, considering this with the seriousness she applied to things that mattered. "He looked lonely," she said simply, "like he was really far from where he was supposed to be." Maya set down her pen. She didn't know what to say to that exactly. She thought about the quality of his eyes again, the clarity that she hadn't expected. Oh, the way he looked at Lily, not with the gratitude of a person receiving charity, but with the attention of a person recognizing something they'd thought was gone. What you give away, you keep forever. She shook her head slightly, quietly, and picked up her pen again. It was a Saturday in November. She had rent to figure out and groceries put away and a daughter to feed and a Monday shift to get to. She had the practical, pressing business of her actual life to attend to. She did not know that 3 blocks away, a man named Arthur Whitfield was sitting in the back of a car that had been parked, engine running, waiting for him, while his assistant handed him a warm cup of coffee and tried not to look too alarmed. She did not know that Arthur Whitfield was 71 years old and the founder of Whitfield Health Systems, which operated 42 hospitals and rehabilitation centers across 11 states, which had annual revenue of approximately $4.3 billion, which employed more than 60,000 people, which had recently been ranked for the 3rd consecutive year as one of the most admired companies in American healthcare. She did not know that he had been sitting outside Parker's Family Market in a worn coat with a paper cup in front of him, the 3rd such location in 3 weeks, because 14 months ago he had sat in a hospital bed in the cardiac unit of his own hospital and stared at the ceiling for 4 days and decided when he was released that he needed to understand something. Something about the world as it actually was, and not as it presented itself to a man with a billion-dollar company and a corner office and a name on the side of a building. She did not know that in 3 weeks of sitting in corners and doorways, in the cold and the indifference and the determined non-seeing of people moving through their lives, he had encountered exactly one person who had looked at him and seen a human being rather than a problem. She did not know that the person had been 7 years old and had given up a quarter she'd been saving for 3 weeks and had crouched down to his eye level and had told him in complete sincerity that she'd decided he needed it more. She did not know any of this. She would by morning. Maya put Lily to bed at 8:30. Lily had a system which she took very seriously. First the teeth, and which required the special toothpaste with the blue cap, not the other one. Then the pajamas, the ones with the small stars printed on them, and if those weren't clean, then the ones with the stripes were an acceptable substitute, though not ideal. Then the book, They were in the middle of a story about a girl who discovered her grandmother was secretly a lighthouse keeper, which Lily had strong opinions about and discussed as if the characters were people she knew personally. Then finally lights out, except for the small owl nightlight on the dresser that had been there since Lily was 2 and was now non-negotiable in the way that things become non-negotiable when they are part of the architecture of a child's feeling safe. Maya read 2 chapters. Lily's questions about the lighthouse keeper slowed and then stopped. By the second chapter, her eyes were barely open. Maya closed the book, sat for a moment in the dark, in the warm smell of her daughter's room, the owl light casting its small orange glow across the walls. He looked lonely, like he was really far from where he was supposed to be. She kissed Lily's forehead and went to bed. She didn't hear the car at first. She'd been up at 5, habit, the body's alarm system that didn't need an alarm, and was in the kitchen making coffee, still in her robe. Still that foggy stage between sleeping and being awake where thoughts haven't organized themselves yet. The coffee maker was old and noisy and took its time. She stood waiting for it the way she always did, hands on the counter, looking at nothing. She heard Lily before she heard the car. "Mama," Lily's voice from the window of her bedroom. To clear caring, the tone of a child who has seen something that requires immediate adult attention. "Mama, come look." Maya pulled her robe tighter and went to Lily's room. Her daughter was on her knees on the bed, pressed up against the window, breath making a small circle of fog on the glass. She looked back at Maya with wide eyes. "There's a car," she said. Maya looked. On Calvert Street, which at 5:15 on a Sunday morning was completely empty of everything except the wind and a couple of plastic bags moving along the gutter, there was a car, not just any car, a black car, long and immaculate, the kind that doesn't belong on Calvert Street at any hour, but particularly not at this one. It was parked directly in front of their building. Its engine was off. Maya couldn't see who was inside, if anyone. As she watched, the driver's door opened. A man in a dark coat got out. He walked around the car with the unhurried, precise movements of someone used to following a protocol, opened the back door, and stood beside it. A moment passed. Then another figure emerged from the back seat. Maya's hand went to her robe collar without her entirely meaning to. The second man was older, white-haired. He wore a coat she had never seen before, dark wool, impeccably fitted, and he stood on the sidewalk looking up at the building with the same quality of attention she had seen yesterday outside a grocery store. The same clear eyes, the same unmistakable presence. "It's Arthur," Lily said, with complete serenity. Maya stared. It was. It was the man from outside Parker's Family Market, standing in front of her building at 5:15 in the morning. Mona looking like a man who had always known exactly what he was looking for and had finally precisely arrived. And it was also, unmistakably, something else entirely. Maya stood at her daughter's window for a full 10 seconds, which felt much longer than that. Her mind was doing the thing it did in situations that didn't fit any category she had a protocol for. Running through possibilities, testing explanations, discarding them. Wrong building, wrong person. A car service picking someone else up, stopped in front of theirs by coincidence. The cold playing tricks on her eyes in the early gray light. But it wasn't a trick. The man on the sidewalk was looking up at the building with that same contained, purposeful stillness she'd seen yesterday outside Parker's Market. And it was the same face. She was certain of that. And you don't forget a face with eyes like that. "Mama," Lily was still on her knees on the bed, watching out the window with the bright, unsurprised interest of a child for whom this was simply the next expected thing. "You should go talk to him." "Lily, I don't—" "It's 5 in the morning." "I know." She said it patiently, as if the time were not particularly relevant information. Maya looked at her daughter, then back at the street. The man, Arthur, Lily had called him with that unnerving certainty, had not moved. He stood with his hands at his sides and waited, the way people wait when they have decided on something and are prepared to be patient about it. The driver stood a respectful distance away, hands folded, looking at nothing in particular. She went to the intercom by the front door of the apartment. Her hand hovered over it. Every sensible thing she knew about the world said, "Don't buzz strangers in at 5 in the morning." Every sensible thing she knew said, "A man who follows you home after a chance encounter outside a grocery store is not someone you open your door to." Every sensible thing she knew said, "This is not your situation to walk into. You have a child. You have $47 until Thursday. Well, 43.82 now. You have enough to think about." She pressed the button. "Yes," she said. A pause, then, through the small speaker, the voice she recognized from yesterday. Low, unhurried, with that quality of coming from somewhere specific. "Ms. Monroe, my name is Arthur Whitfield. I apologize for the hour. I'd like to speak with you, if you're willing. I'll understand completely if you're not." Maya's hand was still on the intercom. How do you know my name?" "Your daughter told me yesterday." She introduced herself very thoroughly. A brief pause. "She told me her name, her mother's name, her school, and that you make the best chicken and rice she's ever tasted, which she said was almost certainly the best in the city." Maya closed her eyes for a moment. "Lily." She buzzed him in. She had time while she heard the elevator arriving to register the state of the apartment with new eyes. The way you do when someone unexpected is coming. That sudden, disorienting awareness of the worn patch on the couch arm, the stack of bills on the counter she'd been meaning to file, the slightly too small kitchen table, the crayon drawing Lily had taped to the refrigerator at an angle that made it look like the sun in the picture was sliding off the edge of the world. Because she didn't move any of it. There wasn't time, and more than that, something stopped her. Some instinct that said, "Let it be what it is. Let it be your life, exactly as it is." She opened the door before he knocked. He was not wearing the coat from yesterday. He was dressed now in dark wool trousers and a gray sweater that Maya recognized with the automatic part of her brain that filed away such things without her permission, as the kind of simple, expensive garment that is designed to look understated but costs more than a month of her cafeteria salary. His white hair was combed. He carried nothing but himself. He looked, she thought, like a man who had been somewhere and come back from it. "Thank you," he said, "for opening the door." "I'm still not sure why I did." She stepped back to let him in. Worried because standing in the hallway having this conversation seemed worse than having it inside. He entered slowly without the specific presumption of wealthy men who treat other people's spaces as extensions of their own comfort. He looked around the apartment, one sweep, taking it in, and then looked at her. "I won't take much of your time," he said. "Mr. Whitfield." She crossed her arms. "I need you to explain to me exactly what is happening, who you are, how you knew which building, and what you want. In that order." He nodded once, as if this were a completely reasonable set of requirements, which he supposed it was. "I'll sit if that's all right. My knees aren't what they were." She gestured at the kitchen table. He sat. She remained standing, arms still crossed. Behind her, as she heard the soft sound of small feet on the floor. Lily, having decided that being in bed while something interesting happened was not an acceptable option. "Baby, go back to—" "It's Arthur," Lily said, appearing at Maya's shoulder, sleep rumpled and utterly certain. She looked at the man at the table with the satisfaction of someone whose prediction has been confirmed. "I told you he'd come." Arthur Whitfield looked at Lily for a moment with the same expression Maya had seen yesterday, that quality of seeing something he hadn't expected to find. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," Lily said gravely, and then she went and sat down at the table across from him with the poise of a person settling in for an important meeting, which was apparently what this was. Maya pulled out the third chair, sat down, looked at the man. Tell me, she said, Arthur Whitfield told her. He told it straightforwardly, without preamble or performance, in the tone of a man who has spent a long time working out what the true version of something is and is now simply reporting it. 14 months ago, he said, he had been in a meeting, a quarterly strategy review. He could no longer remember exactly what was being discussed, when he had felt a pressure in his chest that was unlike anything he'd felt before. He had excused himself from the meeting. He had not made it to his assistant's desk. He had woken up 4 days later in the cardiac unit of Harrington Regional Medical Center, which was, technically, one of the 42 hospitals his company operated, which meant he had spent 4 days unconscious in a building with his name on the board of directors, which struck him, worse when he woke and was told this, as something either deeply ironic or deeply appropriate, depending on how you chose to look at it. He'd had time in the weeks of recovery that followed to look at a great many things. I'd built something real, he said. He was speaking carefully, the way a person speaks when they have thought about something extensively and want to be accurate about it. Whitfield Health Systems, 42 facilities, 60,000 employees, real medicine, real care, real outcomes. I'm not apologizing for any of that. He paused. But somewhere along the way, I stopped understanding what it actually meant, on the ground. What a hospital feels like from the inside when you're not the one with the name on the letterhead. What it means to need help and not know if you'll receive it. Maya said nothing. She was listening. Outraged, my doctor told me when I was discharged that my stress levels were the primary contributing factor. He said it with diplomacy, which doctors learn to do. What he meant was that I had spent 30 years treating everything except my actual life as urgent. Arthur looked at his hands resting on her kitchen table. I had an ex-wife I'd failed to be present for, a son I'd been meaning to spend more time with for approximately 15 years, and an understanding of my own company that was about 10 levels removed from anything real. He looked up. So I decided to go outside. Maya blinked. Outside. I wanted to know what the world looked like from the ground, not from a car, not from a boardroom, not from behind a name badge that makes people behave differently the moment they see it. He said it plainly, was without the self-consciousness of a man who expects to be congratulated for the idea. I wanted to know what it felt like to be invisible. Maya thought of something she'd been thinking just yesterday, on the bus, the word she'd used for what she'd watched him sitting in, invisible, the particular skill she'd said she'd developed herself. She said nothing. 3 weeks, Arthur continued, different locations, different days, a coat from a thrift store, a paper cup. He paused. In 3 weeks, 342 people walked past me without making eye contact. 14 people made eye contact and then looked away. 2 people told me to move along. 1 woman told me I should be ashamed. His voice was even, not bitter, simply reporting. And 1 person crouched down. He looked at Lily. Lily looked back at him with the serious attention she gave things that mattered. She crouched down to my level, he said quietly, and she looked at me like I was a person, not a problem, not an inconvenience, not something to feel guilty about and then move past. He paused. She gave me something she'd been saving, and she told me she'd decided I needed it more. And she said it the way people say something when they mean it. No performance, no audience, no angle. Just true. Maya felt something move through her that she didn't immediately have words for. She looked at her daughter, who was sitting very still, listening with the full attention she brought to the lighthouse keeper's story, into mathematics problems, into everything that seemed to her to be genuinely important. I'm telling you this, Arthur said. Yes, because I want you to understand that I'm not here out of guilt or charity or the particular kind of condescension that wealthy people sometimes confuse with generosity. He met Maya's eyes directly. I'm here because in 3 weeks, your daughter was the only person I encountered who treated me like a human being. And I would like to know her And you, if you're willing. The apartment was quiet. The radiator knocked once and fell silent. How did you find out which building? Maya asked. She told me you live on Calvert Street near the bus stop by the church with the message board. He said it without apology. There are 4 apartment buildings in that range. I had my assistant drive the block at 5 o'clock this morning. Yours was the second building. Maya processed this. So and you just waited on the street? I've been waiting on streets for 3 weeks, he said. I've gotten used to it. Despite herself, despite everything she was still holding carefully in check, the suspicion, the wariness, the self-protective instinct of a woman who had learned that things that seemed like they might be good were often simply things that hadn't turned bad yet. She felt the corner of her mouth move. She made coffee. It was not a decision she fully understood at the time. Later, thinking back, she wouldn't be able to say exactly why she put the kettle on instead of asking him to leave. Maybe it was the quality of his telling, the absence of performance, the way he didn't seem to need anything from her except to be heard and believed. Maybe it was Lily, sitting across from him at the table with her arms folded and her expression saying clearly that she had known all along this was how the morning would go, and she was simply glad the adults had caught up. Maybe it was because Maya Monroe was 32 years old and she was tired, and there was something in the way he'd said she looked at me like I was a person that she recognized with a pain she hadn't been expecting. She made coffee. She put a cup in front of him. She sat back down. Lily, she said, can you go get your drawing from yesterday, the one you were working on? Lily looked between them for a moment, calculating whether this was a way of being excluded or whether her mother genuinely wanted the drawing. She decided it was genuine and went. Maya looked at Arthur Whitfield across the small table, with its slightly uneven leg and its ring marks from many mornings of coffee cups. You said Whitfield Health Systems, she said. Yes. That's, the hospital where I work is a Whitfield facility. Something shifted in his expression. Which one? Harrington General. He was quiet for a moment. I know that hospital well. I was there myself not long ago. In the cardiac unit, you said. Yes. She wrapped both hands around her own coffee cup. Outside, the November light was beginning to establish itself in thin gray streaks through the kitchen window. Calvert Street was waking up. She could hear the distant early sounds of the city, a car, a door, someone's dog. Mr. Whitfield, she said, what is it that you actually want? From me, from us? He looked at her steadily. To start with, I'd like to know your name. Your actual name. I only know what Lily told me. Maya Monroe. Maya? He said it with the care of someone filing it away properly. What do you do at Harrington General? Cafeteria. I serve the lunch line on weekdays. I also clean offices 3 nights a week for a company downtown. He didn't flinch at this. Didn't offer the particular expression people sometimes offered when they processed information about someone else's financial reality. That combination of pity and relief that is, ultimately, about themselves. He just nodded. That's a significant amount of work, he said. It's what the situation requires. How long have you been doing both? 2 years. She paused. Since my husband left. She said it the way she'd learned to say it. Clean, factual, no edge on it. Because the edge had taken too much energy to maintain, and she'd eventually set it down. It wasn't dramatic. He just decided the life we were building wasn't the one he wanted, and he left. Lily was 5. Arthur received this without comment, just listened. She doesn't remember it as a hard thing, Maya said, and she heard something in her own voice she hadn't intended. A privacy, a tenderness. She remembers it as just the way things are. Our life, the 2 of us. She's fine. She stopped, looked at the table. She's better than fine. She's remarkable. I know, Arthur said. I could see that from 30 seconds. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Lily came back with the drawing. She set it on the table between them without ceremony. Maya looked at it, really looked at it, for the first time. It was Arthur, unmistakably, precisely Arthur, despite being drawn by a 7-year-old with crayons. The white hair, the slight bow of the head, the cup in front. But what Lily had captured that Maya hadn't expected, what made her breath catch slightly, was the expression, the loneliness in it, the specific quality of someone who is far from where he is supposed to be. She looked at her daughter. Lily was watching Arthur to see how he would respond to the drawing. Arthur looked at it for a long time, long enough that the silence in the kitchen became a different kind of silence. Not awkward, and not empty, but full of something. He looked at it the way a person looks at something that shows them clearly, and he seemed to need a moment before he could speak. "This is good work," he said finally. His voice was slightly different than it had been. "This is very good work, Lily." Lily nodded, pleased. "I drew what I saw." "You drew more than that." He looked at her. "You drew what it felt like." Lily considered this distinction, decided she agreed with it. Arthur looked up at Maya. "Does she have art instruction?" "They do some at school, not much." "She should have more." Maya felt the familiar, complicated thing rise in her chest. The defensive instinct, the one that said, "I know what my daughter needs. I am doing what I can. Don't sit at my table and catalog what's missing." She kept it from her face. "One, a lot of things should be different than they are," she said evenly. He heard the tone. He didn't push. Instead, he said, "Tell me about your life, not the circumstances. I've asked too many questions about the circumstances. Tell me about your days, what they're actually like." No one had asked her that in a very long time. The directness of it caught her off guard. She told him. She told him about the bus at 6:40 and the cafeteria at 7:30 and the particular rhythm of the lunch service. The smell of it, the noise of it, the way the doctors never looked at you and the patients sometimes did, and the patients were the ones who said thank you. She told him about the nights at Pristine Point, the way the offices were always a particular kind of quiet that felt like being inside someone else's life after they'd left it. When she told him about Lily's school projects and Mrs. Ortega across the hall who kept Lily on the cleaning nights, and who had become, slowly and without either of them naming it, something important. She told him about the Lighthouse Keeper book. She told him about the crackers counted out in the bag. She didn't tell him about the rent letter. She didn't know why. Some remaining piece of pride, perhaps, or the fear that if she said it out loud to a man who could presumably solve it with a phone call, she would lose something she needed to keep. He listened to all of it. He asked questions that were precise and small, the kind that showed he'd actually heard what came before them. He didn't fill silence with reassurance. He just listened, and she found, to her own surprise, that she hadn't finished. Outside the window, Calvert Street had fully woken up. The Sunday morning sounds of the neighborhood came through the glass. Someone playing music from a car, the distant voices of people at the corner, a church bell from somewhere farther away. The coffee cups were empty. Lily had brought her drawing pad and was making a new drawing, quiet and occupied, at the corner of the table. Maya stopped talking and became aware of how much she had said. She looked at Arthur Whitfield. He was watching her with that quality of attention she kept coming back to, the kind that didn't need to be performing patience, because it actually was patient. "You're good at listening," she said. It came out like an accusation, slightly, which wasn't what she'd intended. "I learned it late," he said. "I had 69 years of practice at the other thing first." She almost smiled. His phone in his pocket made a sound. He glanced at it briefly and then set it face down on the table, which Maya noted in the part of her mind that catalogued such things as a deliberate and specific choice. "May I ask you something directly?" he said. "You've been direct this whole time. Don't start being careful now." "Fair." He looked at her steadily. "Is there something immediate, something pressing that I should know about? You don't have to tell me, but if there is, I'd like to know." The silence stretched. Maya looked at the stack of bills on the counter, visible from where she sat. She hadn't moved them when he came in. "Let it be your life exactly as it is." She looked at him. "My rent," she said. "I'm behind $640. I have until December 1st. She said it flatly. "That's 19 days from now." He didn't react with the expression she'd been afraid of. He just nodded once, taking it in. "And the rest of it? The regular weekly?" "I'm managing. The back rent is the thing I can't math my way out of." "Have you looked for resources, organizations that—" "Yes," she said it without heat. "I'm working on it. I have a call to make Monday, and I'm going to ask about holiday shifts at the hospital this week." She paused. "I'll figure it out. I always figure it out." "I believe you," he said, and the way he said it made it not a compliment, but simply an observation, a statement of fact about a person he had taken the time to actually see. That was when her phone rang. She almost didn't answer it, but she saw the caller ID, Mrs. Elkins, and something cold moved through her, because Mrs. Elkins, where the building manager, did not call on Sunday mornings for reasons that were good. "I'm sorry," she said, and stepped away from the table. She answered the call in the narrow hallway between the kitchen and Lily's room, her back to the door, her voice low. "Ms. Monroe." Mrs. Elkins sounded tired, tired and sorry, which was worse than if she'd sounded businesslike. "I hate to call on a Sunday, I really do, but I've been on the phone with the ownership office, and they've moved up the timeline. They need an answer by the 25th, not December 1st, the 25th. A pause. "I'm so sorry, honey." I pushed back as hard as I could. Maya stood in the hallway. She pressed her free hand flat against the wall. 15 days instead of 19. It was 4 days. Where 4 days shouldn't feel like the difference between something possible and something impossible. But it did. "Thank you for calling, Mrs. Elkins," she said. Her voice was steady. It was always steady. "I'll be in touch." She ended the call. She stood in the hallway for 3 seconds. Then she straightened her spine and went back to the kitchen. Arthur was where she'd left him. Lily was still drawing. Neither of them appeared to have moved. Maya sat down. She put her phone face down on the table the same way he had put his. "The timeline moved up," she said. She said it to the middle distance, not to him, processing it out loud, the way she sometimes had to. 19 days became 15. Arthur said nothing for a moment. Then, "Maya." She looked at him. "Let me help you." She had been expecting this. She had known it was coming from the moment she buzzed him through the front door, possibly from the moment she'd looked out Lily's window and seen the black car. She had been bracing for it with the particular practiced brace of a woman who has learned that offers of help from powerful people are rarely without their own specific weight, their own shape, their own cost. "I don't know you," she said. "I know. I don't take money from people I don't know." "I'm not offering money," he said. "Not the way you're thinking of it." She looked at him. "Then what are you offering?" He was quiet for a moment, choosing his words the way he had chosen all his words this morning, with care, without performance. "I run a health system," he said. 60,000 employees. Most of them doing exactly what you do. Essential work, difficult hours, white work that holds things together, compensated in a way that doesn't reflect that. He paused. "I've been building something since I got out of the hospital. A program, internal for employees in the Whitfield system, designed specifically for what I saw when I was lying in that cardiac unit, looking at the ceiling. The gap between what people contribute and what they are able to build for themselves. He looked at her steadily. We call it the Whitfield Foundation. Hardship assistance, skills advancement, emergency support. We launched it 4 months ago, and we've been struggling to identify the right people to help administer it. People who understand what it actually means to need it. People with the judgment to know the difference between a temporary crisis and a structural problem. A pause. And I have been looking for someone to run the program. Someone with integrity. Someone who understands the ground. Maya stared at him. You work at one of our hospitals, he said. You have, based on this conversation, the kind of mind that understands both the numbers and what's behind them. And I have had, he said, and his voice shifted slightly, approximately 40 years of experience identifying people who are more than what their current circumstances suggest. The kitchen was very quiet. Lily at the corner of the table had stopped drawing. She was watching her mother with those calm, dark, patient eyes. You don't know anything about my qualifications, Maya said. I know you count crackers to make sure they last the week, and you do it without resentment. One, I know you worked 2 jobs and still took the time yesterday to explain things to your daughter instead of just pulling her away. I know you opened your door this morning to a stranger because you decided the honest version of events was more likely than the alternative. He paused. And I know your daughter, who understands people with a clarity that most adults have lost, gave her last quarter to a stranger she'd never met because she looked at him and saw something worth caring about. He looked at Lily briefly. Children learn that from somewhere. Maya looked at her hands. This was the moment. She could feel it. The specific gravity of it. The way certain moments announce themselves as things you will remember. She could say no. And she could thank him for the conversation and show him out and call her brother Marcus and spend Monday making the calls she'd been planning to make and solve this the way she'd been solving things for 2 years. Alone, in pieces, from the ground up. She could do that. Or she could look at the man across her kitchen table, a man who had spent 3 weeks sitting in the cold to understand what invisibility felt like, who had listened to her for an hour with actual attention, who had been moved by her daughter the same way she was moved by her daughter every single day, and decide that not all offers come with the cost she'd been expecting. She wasn't there yet. She wasn't ready to trust him. Not fully, not the way the moment seemed to be asking for. 2 years of building walls doesn't end over a cup of coffee on a Sunday morning. She knew that about herself, but she was willing to keep talking. Tell me more about the program, she said. He did. They talked for another hour and 40 minutes. Lily fell asleep on the couch eventually, tucked under the blanket Maya brought from her room, her drawing pad still in her hand. The morning settled into itself around them. The Sunday quiet of a city not in a hurry, the occasional sound from the hallway, the radiator cycling through its unreliable rhythms. Arthur Whitfield talked about the foundation with a specificity that told her it wasn't a concept in development. It was real. It had a budget, a board, a methodology, and a gap. The gap being a director who understood both the administrative side and the human side, who could build the evaluation process that would determine who received assistance and how, who could look at a file and know the difference between a story and the truth underneath a story. He talked about it the way people talk about things they actually care about, which is different from the way they talk about things they're supposed to care about. There's a particular quality to the real thing. Maya had spent 2 years around enough of both to know the difference. She asked questions, careful ones, precise ones, the kind that tested the edges of what he was telling her, that looked for the places where the account didn't hold together. She'd learned to ask this way from years of doing the bills, of reading the fine print on things, of understanding that the important information was usually in what wasn't said as much as what was. He answered everything. When he didn't know something, he said so. When a question touched on something he'd gotten wrong in the past, He said that too. By the end of the second hour, Maya knew three things with some certainty. The first was that Arthur Whitfield was telling the truth about the foundation, about his reasons for being here, about what yesterday had meant to him. She couldn't have explained exactly how she knew this. It was a confluence of things. The way his account was consistent in the details, the way his attention didn't vary when the conversation moved to uncomfortable territory, the way he talked about his failures with the same directness he brought to everything else. The second was that the program he was describing was real, and it was significant, and it needed exactly the kind of person he'd said it needed. The third thing she knew was that she was frightened, not of him, and specifically, she'd mostly moved past that in the first 20 minutes, but of the shape of what was being offered, the way it touched the exact outline of what was missing. There is a particular fear that comes from being seen accurately, from having someone look at you and know what you actually need and then offer it. It should feel like relief. It often feels, instead, like standing at the edge of something high. She was standing at the edge. "I need time," she said. "I need to think about this." "Of course." He didn't press. He didn't seem surprised. "I need references, real ones, people I can actually call. I'll have my assistant send them today. And I need you to understand." She stopped, started again. "Whatever this becomes, I don't need to be rescued. That's not what I'm looking for." He looked at her steadily. "And I know that. I need to know that you know that. Maya," he said it with a precision that made her pay attention. "I spent 3 weeks invisible on city streets looking for someone who treated me like a person. The person I found is sitting across from me, telling me she doesn't need to be rescued." He paused. "That is not a problem. That is exactly who I was looking for." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Once." "Send the references," she said. "I'll look at them." He rose from the chair with the careful deliberateness of a man who has learned not to take his joints for granted. He looked at Lily, asleep on the couch with her drawing pad, her face completely peaceful in the way that children's faces are sometimes almost unbearable in their openness. "She's going to be something," he said quietly. Not a question. "What she already is," Maya said. He looked at her. For a moment, just a moment, the contained composure he'd carried through the whole conversation shifted. She saw underneath it what had been there all along. A man who had been lonely for a very long time, who had built something enormous and sat in a cardiac bed, wondering if it had been worth the cost. Who had spent 3 weeks in the cold and found, in the 30 seconds of a child crouching down, something he'd stopped believing the world still contained. "Thank you," he said, "for the coffee, for listening. Thank you for not making it what I was afraid it was going to be." He almost smiled, the same almost smile from yesterday outside the store. "What were you afraid it was?" "I wasn't sure," she said honestly. "That's almost worse." He nodded once. Then he went to the door, and she walked him out, and she watched him get into the elevator, and she stood in the hallway after the doors closed for a moment before going back inside. She locked the deadbolt. Both ways. Habit. She went and stood over Lily's sleeping form on the couch. She looked at her daughter for a long moment, the purple coat draped over the back of the couch, the drawing pad in her loose hand, the small face completely at peace. "I told you," Lily murmured without opening her eyes. Maya felt something loosen in her chest. Not break open, not yet, just loosen. "Go back to sleep," she said softly. She went to the window. The black car was still below. She watched it for a moment. Then Arthur emerged from the building entrance, walked to the car and got in. The driver closed the door after him. They sat there for a minute. She imagined paperwork, a phone call, instructions being given. Then the car pulled away from the curb, smooth and unhurried, and moved down Calvert Street, and turned and was gone. She looked at the empty street. November light was fully established now, silver and thin over the city. The message board in front of the church down the block was visible from here if you look carefully. She hadn't noticed the new message when they'd walked to school on Friday. She could make it out now, just barely, from the window. Sometimes the answer walks in when you open the door. Maya Monroe stood at the window of her apartment on Calvert Street in the city of Harrington, Georgia, on a Sunday morning in November, and felt the exact specific sensation of a life standing at the edge of change. She didn't know yet whether to step toward it or back away from it. She didn't know yet what the references would say, or what the conversations ahead would bring, or how she was going to find the courage to trust something this large after 2 years of learning that small and careful was safer. But she had opened the door, and she had listened, and she had not said no. For a woman who had spent 2 years with her walls exactly where she needed them, that was not a small thing. That was, in fact, the beginning of everything. Maya called the references. Every one of them answered. She said yes on a Tuesday. The rent was paid, not by Arthur, by the Foundation's emergency fund, the program she would now run. Her first case was her own, which felt both humbling and exactly right. She started January 2nd. Her office had a window. Lily visited once and immediately began drawing the view. Arthur came for dinner the following Sunday. He brought nothing except himself, which was, Maya had decided, more than enough. Lily saved another quarter, just in case. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.